Sir, what are you doing here?
I'm going into my house. My car's in the driveway. My name's on the mailbox.
Do you have ID? We got a call about a suspicious male lingering.
I do, but why'd you stop me? My porch camera's recording this.
Hands where I can see them. Stay right there. I'm calling back up.
It was 8:57 p.m. on a quiet Tuesday night. The street was lined with identical townhomes, warm porch lights glowing softly against trimmed hedges and freshly paved sidewalks. The kind of neighborhood people described as safe, predictable, calm. He stood in front of his own house keys and his right-hand phone pressed to his ear. Black man, late 30s, navy suit jacket draped over his arm. He had just pulled into the driveway after a long day and was waiting for the garage door to finish cycling. A patrol car rolled past slowly, then stopped. Red and blue lights didn't flash yet. Not at first. The engine idled. A door opened. Heavy boots hit the pavement. "Sir." The voice was firm, controlled. He turned. A white officer stood a few yards away, one hand resting near his belt. The other held a flashlight beam already trained on his chest. "Can I help you?" the man asked. "What are you doing here?" the officer replied. The question landed wrong, not aggressive but loaded. "I live here," he said, "just getting into my house." The officer scanned him. The suit jacket, the phone, the car in the driveway. "This house. Yes, this house." The officer paused, then spoke into his radio quietly. "Location check. Possible suspicious individual." Suspicious, in front of his own front door. The man lowered his phone. "You can see my car in the driveway. My name's on the mailbox." The officer didn't look. "Do you have identification on you?" "Yes," he said, keeping his voice even. "I do. But before I reach for it, can you tell me why you stopped me?" The officer's jaw tightened. "Because someone reported a man matching your description lingering in the area." Lingering. He glanced at his front door, at the porch camera blinking red. "I'm waiting for my garage to open," he said. "That's it." The officer raised his radio again. "I'm going to need a second unit. Back up." The quiet street changed immediately. Porch lights flicked on. A curtain moved across the street. Somewhere a phone camera began recording. "Sir," the officer said, "stay where you are." The man nodded slowly. He knew this moment. The shift. The point where explaining stopped mattering. "I need you to understand something," he said. "I am not a threat. I am not trespassing. And this is about to get very serious if you keep escalating." The officer met his eyes. His tone hardened. "Hands where I can see them." And just like that, a man waiting to go inside his own home was treated like he didn't belong anywhere near it. He had learned to wait before speaking. Learned it in courtrooms where timing mattered more than volume. Learned it in hallways where being the only black man in the room meant every word carried extra weight. His name was Marcus Reed, born in Baltimore, raised by a mother who worked nights as a nurse, and a father who taught him that preparation was protection. Marcus grew up surrounded by rules, curfews, grades, expectations. He learned early that mistakes were not forgiven equally. While other kids were allowed to fail loudly, he was taught to succeed quietly. He carried that discipline with him through college, through law school, through clerkships where he was often the only one who looked like him. He graduated near the top of his class, passed the bar on the first try, joined the U.S. Attorney's Office not through favors but through relentless consistency. Long hours, unpaid weekends, cases no one else wanted. He prosecuted fraud, public corruption, and violent crime. He stood in federal court and argued the law with precision and restraint. At 38, Marcus became a federal prosecutor. Not a title he advertised, not something he mentioned unless required. He understood how quickly authority could shift depending on who was listening. His badge stayed in his briefcase, his credentials in his wallet. He didn't rely on them for safety. Experience told him better. The house he stood in front of that night was not a symbol. It was a decision, close to work, quiet. Good schools for his daughter when she visited on weekends. He had moved in 6 months earlier, paid the mortgage, paid the taxes, mowed the lawn himself. The officer who stopped him knew none of this. Officer Daniel Whitaker had been on patrol for 9 years. Solid record. No major incidents. Known as cautious. His supervisors liked that word. Cautious. It meant he asked questions. It meant he trusted his instincts. It also meant he rarely second-guessed them. Whitaker had responded to a call from a resident 2 streets over. Unknown male. Standing near a home. Caller said it felt off. That was enough. It often was. He arrived already alert, already forming a picture in his head. Black male, nighttime, residential street, alone. The details filled themselves in before he stepped out of the car. He told himself he was being proactive. That backup was about safety. That waiting for verification was just good policing. What he didn't examine was why the situation felt dangerous to him in the first place. Marcus stood under the porch light, aware of the cameras, the neighbors, the quiet closing in. He had argued cases built on less evidence than this stop. He recognized the pattern immediately, suspicion searching for justification. Two lives shaped by law were colliding, one built to enforce it, one built to navigate it. Neither man planned for this moment, but both were about to be defined by how they handled it. The street no longer felt ordinary. What had been quiet minutes earlier now carried a tight stillness, the kind that settles when people sense trouble, but don't yet understand it. Marcus stood near the edge of his driveway porch light, illuminating his face, his hands visible, his keys resting on the hood of his car exactly where the officer could see them. Officer Whitaker kept his distance, too far to be conversational, close enough to control the space. His radio crackled softly at his shoulder. Sir Whitaker said, "I'm going to need you to stay right there." Marcus nodded once. "I'm not going anywhere. I'm home." Whitaker's eyes moved past him to the house. The front door, the garage, the security camera blinking red above the porch. "If you live here, why were you standing outside so long?" Marcus exhaled slowly. "Because my garage door was opening. Because I was on the phone. Because this is my driveway." Whitaker didn't respond. He pressed the radio button again. "Second unit en route." The words landed like a weight. Backup wasn't for verification anymore. It was for dominance. Across the street, a neighbor stepped onto the porch, arms crossed. Another house down, someone raised a phone pretending to check messages while clearly recording. Curtains shifted. Doors opened just enough to see. Marcus felt the familiar calculation begin. Every movement now mattered. Every word would be replayed. He kept his voice level. "Officer, if you want to verify residency, you can run the address. You can check the license plate. You can speak to me like a person who lives here." Whitaker's tone hardened. "I'm asking the questions right now." And there it was. The pivot from inquiry to authority. Marcus reached into his pocket slowly. "My ID is in my wallet. I'm going to retrieve it." Whitaker raised his hand. "Stop. Don't reach for anything yet." Marcus froze. Hands open, palms out. "This is exactly how people get hurt," Marcus said quietly. "When communication breaks down." Whitaker didn't answer. He watched the hands, the body, the posture. The silence stretched. The sound of another patrol car approached, tires crunching on gravel as it pulled to the curb. Lights flashed, now red and blue, reflecting off parked cars and living room windows. The second officer stepped out, younger, alert. His eyes went immediately to Marcus. "What's going on?" "Possible suspicious person," Whitaker said. "Claims he lives here." "Claims." The second officer looked at the house, then at Marcus, then back at Whitaker. "Why didn't we just verify?" Whitaker didn't reply. Marcus felt the shift in the crowd as well. Someone across the street spoke louder than before. "That's his house. He lives there." Whitaker turned toward the voice. "Sir, go back inside." The neighbor didn't move. "I see him every day." Phones were fully out now, recording openly, no pretense. Marcus knew escalation when he saw it. Backup had arrived. Authority had doubled. Retreat was no longer an option for Whitaker without losing face. Marcus lowered his voice. "Officer, I'm asking you to de-escalate. I am asking you to verify facts before this goes further." Whitaker stared at him. "Hands where I can see them. We're going to detain you until we sort this out." Detain, the word landed hard. A man standing in his own driveway, surrounded by neighbors under his own porch light, was no longer presumed to belong. He was now something to be controlled, and the street understood before the officers did. This was no longer about safety. It was about power asserting itself in public. The decision was made without a countdown. No warning, no raised voices. Just a shift in posture that changed everything. Officer Whitaker stepped closer. Not fast, not slow, deliberate. The second officer moved to the opposite side, creating a narrow corridor of control that funneled Marcus away from his front door and toward the street. Sir Whitaker said, "Turn around and face the vehicle." Marcus didn't move immediately. He looked at his house, the porch light, the door he was supposed to walk through 10 minutes ago. "Am I being arrested?" he asked. "You're being temporarily detained." "For what?" "For officer safety." The words meant nothing and everything at the same time. Marcus turned slowly. He placed his hands on the hood of his car, fingers spread just as instructed. The metal was still warm from the drive home. The sound of the patrol car engine idling filled the silence. The second officer moved behind him, shoes scuffed on asphalt. A hand brushed his elbow, guiding, adjusting. The pressure was firm, professional, cold. Marcus felt the first cuff close around his wrist. The click was louder than it should have been. Sharp, final. A murmur spread across the street. Someone said his name out loud. Someone else said, "This is wrong." A phone camera zoomed in. Whitaker avoided looking at the crowd. He focused on procedure now. On steps. On control. He had crossed a line and the only way forward was through it. The second cuff snapped shut. The chain tightened as Marcus adjusted his balance. He stood there handcuffed in front of his own house. The porch camera captured everything. The neighbors captured everything. The patrol car dash camera recorded from the curb. Multiple angles. No ambiguity. Marcus closed his eyes for half a second. Not in fear, in calculation. This was no longer about going inside. It was about surviving the moment without giving them anything they could twist later. The second officer spoke quietly. "Sir, do you have anything on you we should know about?" Marcus kept his voice level. "I have a wallet. I have keys. I have a federal ID in my briefcase inside that house." Whitaker froze for a fraction of a second. Federal ID? What kind of federal ID? Marcus didn't answer immediately. He knew the danger of saying it now. He also knew the danger of waiting. "I am a federal prosecutor," he said finally. "United States Attorney's Office." The street went silent. Whitaker's face didn't change right away, but his eyes did. The confidence cracked. "Just enough." "That's something you should have mentioned earlier," Whitaker said. Marcus stared straight ahead. "You didn't ask the right questions." The second officer shifted uncomfortably. He glanced at the house again. At the cameras, at the phones. Whitaker keyed his radio with a different tone now. "Dispatch, I need immediate supervisor response. Possible misidentification." "Possible." Marcus was guided into the back of the patrol car. The door opened. Plastic seat. No room to move his wrists. The door closed with a dull thud that echoed down the street. From inside the car, Marcus could still see his house through the glass. His front door. Unlocked. Unused. Red and blue lights washed over the facade again and again. The injustice wasn't loud. It was methodical. And it was fully documented. The patrol car door opened slowly. A supervisor stood outside now. Middle-aged, calm posture, voice trained to take control of damage before it spread. His eyes moved from Marcus's cuffed hands to the house behind him, then to the cluster of neighbors still filming. "Sir," the supervisor said, "what is your full name?" Marcus answered without hesitation. "Marcus Allen Reed." The supervisor nodded once and spoke into his radio, lower this time. "Run the name. Federal database. Priority." Seconds stretched. The red and blue lights continued to pulse, but something in the air shifted. The urgency changed direction. Whitaker stood a few steps back now. His shoulders were no longer squared. His jaw was tight lips pressed thin. The second officer avoided eye contact altogether. Dispatch responded. "Confirmed. Marcus Reed, active federal prosecutor, United States Attorney's Office. Cleared, no warrants, no flags." The words landed one by one, each heavier than the last. The supervisor closed his eyes briefly, then opened them and looked directly at Whitaker. Why was he detained? Whitaker swallowed. "Caller report. Suspicious behavior. Standing outside the residence." The supervisor glanced at the house. The driveway. The porch camera blinking red. He didn't raise his voice. "You detained a federal prosecutor in front of his own home without verifying residency." Whitaker said nothing. The supervisor turned to Marcus. "Sir, I am removing the restraints." The cuffs were unlocked. The metal fell away. Marcus flexed his wrists slowly. Deep red impressions circled his skin. He did not hide them. "I want everything preserved," Marcus said. "Body camera footage, dash cam, radio traffic, neighbor video, the initial call." The supervisor nodded. "Of course." Marcus stepped out of the patrol car. He stood upright, shoulders back, hands now free. He looked at his house again. The same door, the same porch light. Everything familiar now altered. "I want your badge number," Marcus said, looking directly at Whitaker. Whitaker recited it quietly. "I want your supervisor's name." The supervisor answered for him. Marcus nodded once. "This encounter will be documented. Formally." The neighbors didn't disperse. If anything, they moved closer. Phones still up, evidence still collecting. The supervisor addressed the crowd. "The situation is resolved. You're free to return inside." No one moved immediately. Everyone understood what they had witnessed. Marcus walked toward his front door. Not hurried, not triumphant. Measured. He unlocked it and stepped inside his home for the first time that night. Behind him, Whitaker remained on the curb, staring at the ground. The second officer stood beside him, silent. Authority had been exposed, and the cost was no longer theoretical. This was no longer a misunderstanding. It was a record. The footage reached the internet before sunrise. A neighbor's video showed Marcus standing in his driveway, hands visible, voice steady. Another clip captured the cuffs closing. A third showed the patrol car lights washing over his front door while neighbors spoke up in disbelief. Together, they told a story that needed no narration. By mid-morning, the clips were everywhere. Local feeds first. Then national timelines. Comment sections filled with the same sentence written 1,000 different ways. He was waiting outside his own house. Marcus did not post anything. He didn't need to. The evidence spoke in plain language. By the end of the week, he filed a formal complaint, then a civil claim, unlawful detention, violation of constitutional rights, abuse of authority. The filing was meticulous. Timestamps, radio transcripts, body camera frames cited down to the second. He approached it the same way he approached every case. Calm, precise, unavoidable. The department announced an internal investigation within 24 hours. Standard phrasing. Commitment to review. No admission of fault. Inside internal affairs, the tone was different. The initial call was reviewed first. Caller stated a man did not appear to belong. No crime alleged. No threat reported. No attempt made by the responding officer to verify residency through available databases before requesting backup. Officer Whitaker's body camera footage showed escalation without cause. Commands issued without explanation. Detention justified after the fact. The findings were released quietly 3 weeks later. Policy violations. Failure to de-escalate. Improper detention. Unnecessary use of restraints. Whitaker was placed on administrative leave, then suspended, then terminated. 9 years on patrol ended without ceremony. The second officer received formal discipline and mandatory retraining. His record would carry the incident forward. The city moved to settle before trial. The amount was not announced publicly at first. Sources later confirmed it reached into 7 figures. Enough to close the case. Not enough to erase the image of a man handcuffed in his own driveway. Marcus allocated the settlement with intention. Legal costs. Community legal defense funds. Programs focused on unlawful stops and racial bias in policing. He declined interviews, declined panel discussions, declined invitations to become a symbol. When he finally released a statement, it was brief. This was not about my profession. It was about my presence. The department updated procedures. Mandatory verification before detention. Revised standards for backup calls. Training modules rewritten. Statements issued. None of it changed what had already been recorded. Marcus returned to his routine. Court in the mornings. Case files in the evenings. He walked to his front door without pause now. Neighbors nodded differently. Some apologized. Others looked away. The street was quiet again, but the record remained. And accountability for once had followed the truth. What happened to Marcus Reed was not a failure of communication. It was a failure of assumption. A decision made before facts were gathered. A conclusion reached before questions were asked. Legally, the violation is straightforward. Law enforcement officers may not detain an individual without reasonable suspicion, supported by specific, articulable facts. Standing outside a home is not suspicious. Waiting for a garage door to open is not criminal behavior. A vague feeling that someone does not belong does not meet constitutional standards. Calling backup without verification escalates the encounter unnecessarily. Detention without cause transforms a routine inquiry into a civil rights violation. Handcuffing absent a threat resistance or risk of flight compounds that violation. Each step builds on the last, turning bias into action. But law is only part of the lesson. The deeper issue is how quickly perception replaces evidence. Bias rarely announces itself as prejudice. It presents as caution, as instinct, as professionalism. It whispers that something feels off and demands authority respond before reflection can intervene. Marcus Reed did what experts advise. He stayed calm. He communicated clearly. He complied without surrendering dignity. He did not raise his voice. He did not resist. He documented mentally and allowed the cameras to document everything else. And still he was handcuffed. That reality matters. It shows that compliance does not cancel bias. Credentials do not prevent escalation. Respectability does not guarantee safety. So what should viewers take away? First, understand your rights. You have the right to ask why you are being stopped. You have the right to know whether you are being detained. You have the right to remain silent beyond identifying yourself when legally required. Second, document whenever legally possible. Video changes outcomes. Witnesses matter. Timelines matter. Facts protect truth when narratives attempt to rewrite events. Third, recognize escalation early. Backup calls, changes in tone, commands, replacing questions are warning signs. At that point, survival may require patience rather than persuasion. Finally, examine the systems that normalize these encounters. Ask why suspicion attaches so easily to certain bodies in certain spaces. Ask why belonging must be proven by some and assumed for others. Marcus Reed did not seek to be an example. He wanted to go inside his home. His case ended with accountability because the evidence was undeniable. Most do not. The question is not whether this incident was wrong, that is clear. The question is, how many similar moments go undocumented, and what kind of society allows that silence to continue?